Welcome to Andy Staples on 3 and happy bowl season. That's right. This is the last show before you've got bowl games on your TV. That's right. That starts Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern time with the Myrtle Beach Bowl, the soon to be in 2024 Sonny's Barbecue Andy Staples Bowl. We talked about that on Wednesday night's show. If you didn't hear that Dear Andy question where they asked, what would your bowl game be if you sponsored a bowl game? That's the one. So go back and listen to that because that's the game you're going to want. Although, hey, Georgia Southern versus Ohio U, that'll be fun too. On the teal. Also the LA Bowl, the Gronk LA Bowl. Rob Gronkowski is the host. You got UCLA and Boise State and the Independence Bowl, 9:15 Eastern time from Shreveport. Cal and Texas Tech, your first Power 5 on Power 5 matchup of the bowl season. I guess we can still use Power 5 through the bowl season. It becomes not a term anymore after the bowl season, but the Cal, still a member of the Pac-12, not off to the ACC just yet. So get ready for a bowl game. 11 a.m. Eastern time Saturday. There's 5 bowl games this Saturday. Remember, in the New Mexico Bowl, New Mexico State, Fresno State, Diego Pavia is playing for New Mexico State. That's the quarterback. He's the most interesting player in all of these games on Saturday. So give that one a watch as well. We got a lot going on in the world of college football, a lot of news, a lot of movement. So a lot of these schools, they are trying to get their recruiting classes together. The high school players can sign as early as Wednesday. Everybody's trying to nail down their classes. You got the final visit weekend. But the thing is, it will not just be high school players visiting a lot of these campuses this weekend. There will be quite a few transfer portal official visitors. The epicenter of this is going to be Tallahassee, Florida, where 2 highly sought-after transfer portal quarterbacks will be visiting the Seminoles at various points this weekend. We got a big show today. We're going to start it with Pete Nakos, the king of the transfer portal, talking Cam Ward and DJ Uiagalelei visiting Florida State. What happens now to Kyle McCord now that he's not going to Nebraska? What does Ohio State do now at quarterback? So much going on in the portal, and Pete has all the answers. Here's Pete. We welcome Pete Nakos, and we have an official term for when you drop recruiting news on social media or transfer portal news on whatever news you drop a lot of different kinds of news, sports business news, transfer portal. We're going to call them Nakosifications from now on, Pete.
I saw the Twitter reply and you were like, that's it. And I was like, Andy's tuned in, man. Andy is tuned in.
I love it. Nakosifications. So we've had quite a few Nakosifications here on Thursday. I want to start with 2 quarterbacks in the portal who may wind up in the same town. I don't think they're going to be there together, but in pretty rapid succession, DJ Uiagalelei, who's coming from Oregon State, Cam Ward coming from Washington State, both potentially visiting Florida State this weekend.
Yeah, they're both going to be there at very different times. Cam Ward, it's like 5. Cam Ward will be in Tallahassee tonight, and then DJ U's expected to roll in Saturday after Cam leaves. Andy, we talk so much about this quarterback market and everything, and then all of a sudden, right now, the next 72 hours or so, Florida State's going to have the 2 best quarterbacks maybe in the portal in Tallahassee.
Well, and Cam Ward coming from Miami, right? So he's looked at them. That's one where Shannon Dawson, the offense he runs, very similar to what Cam Ward came out of in Washington State. But Florida State, obviously, with the talent they have coming back, with how well they've done historically in the portal under Mike Norvell, I would imagine that's a pretty enticing thing for either of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cam Ward thinks he can play in both offenses really well, and I think the really interesting narrative here per se is the fact that ever since DJU went in the portal, he FSU was the school. It's always been. And then on the flip side, you have Cam Ward, who I mean, Cam's been really open. The NFL is still an option. He's been at Miami. Talking to ESPN earlier today, he even mentioned a possible third visit, which could be at Nebraska or Washington. And it's just two very interesting narratives going up against each other, where DJ wants to be in Tallahassee and Florida State needs to look at Cam Ward, right? Because, I mean, the Cam Ward is a freak and might be a top draft pick in 2025. And Florida State would be doing a disservice if they didn't bring him in.
Well, right. And, DJ, a very different quarterback than Jordan Travis. But Cam, from a skill set perspective, probably can play a similar style to Jordan Travis, which I imagine Mike Norvell enjoyed calling plays for Jordan Travis, probably would enjoy calling plays for Cam Ward too.
Yeah, definitely. Just really interested to watch. I don't think we're going to even know anything until Sunday night. Because I do think they're going to get both on campus.
Couple possibilities here if we play this out. You could have DJU starting against Clemson, which would be storylines galore. If that happened, you'd also potentially have DJU starting against Cam Ward in an ACC game, Florida State, Miami.
Yeah. I think the crazier narrative to me, and this is a huge hypothetical and you'll laugh, but imagine if Cam Ward doesn't commit on that Miami visit, then commits soon after the FSU visit, and now Mario Cristobal has to completely look at his QB board all over again and try to get
DJ. What's up? Will Howard, yes.
I think it's Will Howard, but still, it just would be a crazy turn of events.
It is amazing. This is so much more interesting, I think, than the out of high school recruiting, just because we know these guys so well. And especially DJU. Think about DJU as a true freshman in 2020, replacing Trevor Lawrence at Notre Dame when Trevor had COVID. He's been in our lives for that long. He's got one more year of college football.
The coolest thing about DJ is those 2 years at Clemson just never really meshed the way I think DJ thought. And then you go see him at Oregon State this year and he crushed it, man. Everyone was it's a DJ problem at Clemson. And then he goes to the West Coast and DJ looks like the 5-star that we all knew he could be. And it's just cool to see that play out.
It'll be really interesting to see what happens, whose offense he ends up in and what he ends up doing. Another guy that you reported on this week is Kyle McCord. You said on Wednesday that Nebraska's off the table as an option for him. What are his options now?
Yeah, I think his market isn't exactly what a lot of us thought it'd be when he hit the transfer portal. I've heard Duke thrown around. I've heard Syracuse. Nothing really firm there. But yeah, really interesting position Kyle McCord finds himself in right now.
So yeah, he again started for Ohio State against Michigan less than 3 weeks ago. And now here he is casting about looking for a school. What happens with Ohio State now? Because this is one where they don't have to take a quarterback out of the portal. They have quarterbacks on the roster. They have Aaron Nolan, who's a very highly recruited quarterback, coming with the signing class as well. But is it possible that they put out the bat signal and say, hey, guys in the portal, or even guys who are not in the portal, you might be able to be Ohio State's starting quarterback?
Yeah, so one thing we should make really clear is Kyle McCord will not be going back to Columbus. That is not on the table, just talking to sources and stuff. So anyone hoping to see Kyle McCord back in Columbus, that's not going to happen. The second thing I'll say, though, is I don't think Ohio State is dying to add a transfer portal quarterback right now. They've talked to DJ. Everyone was speculating about Cam Ward to Ohio State. That is not going to happen. They really wanted to get in on Riley Leonard. That just never came to be, I think, as they had hoped to. So, yeah, I think they're going to stay pat. They got Devin Brown. They have Lincoln Keenholz. They're adding Aaron Noland in January. And they're really high on Lincoln, who is a true freshman and will be a sophomore and probably challenge Devin Brown for the starting job if everything plays out the way it is right now.
And the bowl game, Devin Brown's game, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think Devin admitted it, and conversations with the media early this week, and it makes sense. He has game experience, but I'm sure Ryan Day would love to get Lincoln maybe a couple snaps too, just to get some film to look at as we enter the offseason.
Yeah, that's a pretty big job to have open. And, until that Nakosification that Kyle McCord wasn't going to be there, we assumed it was going to be Kyle McCord. So let's talk about another guy who generating a ton of buzz, even though he's not really been a QB1 anywhere yet. He has started a couple games. Malik Murphy, coming from Texas. This is a situation where he has decided that he's not going to be with the Longhorns through the playoffs. So Arch Manning moves into the backup role behind Quinn Ewers. And what is the thinking here with Malik Murphy? Because he's one that after spring practice last year could have entered the portal and had a ton of buzz as well.
Yeah, I think we were all kind of bracing for that, but Malik stayed, and obviously he stepped in this year when Quinn went down, and really tough situation where he can't be with Texas right now for the college football playoff. Andy, you and I were kind of talking about it before. I think that the truth is, though, is that he is really highly sought after right now. He has a great market. Pete Thamel put out like 8 to 10 schools to watch today. I think really early on before we're like, these are the top 3 or something, but definitely has a lot of interest. His athletic ability is insane.
Yeah, and the arm is great. The turnovers that were the question, but again, that was his first couple games as a starter. How does he grow? How does he develop? And that's one, you mentioned Pete Thamel put out several teams. Ohio State was on that list. Georgia was on that list. It does feel like he's one that's going to draw interest from those kind of places because there's 3 years of eligibility remaining.
Yeah, I mean, USC and South Carolina both made it too, which was interesting to see. But yeah, I think the eligibility, he has experience in the Steve Sarkisian offense. He pushed Quinn Ewers. I mean, I think Malik has everything that a lot of offensive coordinators and quarterback coaches are looking for. And right, we talk about dual threat and everything. Like, he is the great college quarterback right now. Like, he is the prototype to an extent of what college coaches want in a quarterback.
Yeah, physically everything you want. Yeah. Now, whether that comes together, it remains to be seen. But in terms of raw tools, yeah, he's exactly what you want. So that market definitely appears to be robust. Another guy, we'll move away from the quarterbacks for a second because I want to talk about Trey Moore, who is one of those guys coming from a group of 5 school at a position that is very valuable in the transfer portal. So he's an edge rusher. He's at UTSA. This is you kind of wonder, like, if Marcus Davenport had been able to take advantage of these transfer rules before he became a first rounder from UTSA. So Trey Moore, you reported that Ohio State called off a visit with Trey Moore, basically getting good news from their defensive lineman from an NFL perspective. But Trey Moore headed to visit Alabama now.
Yeah. So Ohio State did call off that visit, talked to a couple sources at Ohio State, and it was pretty clear to me that the Buckeyes were the ones who called it off. And I mean, I think Texas is still the one to beat right now for Trey Moore, but he is going to visit Alabama this weekend. And man, could you imagine him in a Nick Saban defense?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, that they have had better pass rushers in the last few years at Alabama than they had previously under Nick Saban. Like, Will Anderson obviously was off the charts good, but Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell this year, very good. Like, you throw another person in there like that, and it does help Alabama kind of continue rolling. But Texas is an interesting one as well, because I feel like they would be pretty formidable off the edge if you add a Trey Moore.
And I think the big attraction too for Texas is obviously Trey Moore has proven himself, but Texas also has to make that jump to the SEC next year, and Trey Moore can make that a lot easier with his pass rush ability.
Yeah, because they've got Ethan Burke coming back, and they were using Anthony Hill a lot, in pass rush situations. If you add another kind of elite pass rusher, that is a scary prospect for opposing offensive tackles. So one school that seems to be very active, and I think we may have them number 1 in our team transfer portal rankings at the moment, is Louisville. They are You know, they got the offensive tackle from Yale. They got Thor Griffith, the D tackle from Harvard. Tyler Shook, the quarterback from Texas Tech. You reported that Colin Lacey, the South Alabama receiver transfer, who everybody thought was going to Texas A&M, that he's visiting Louisville.
Yeah, Andrew Corey Brooks is getting to campus tonight, though.
Alabama, yeah.
I mean, Louisville has it together. And let's be blunt, Andy. I think Louisville has done a fantastic job getting its NIL operation in place the last 6 months. They knew the portal was coming. Jeff Brom is all in at Louisville. And yeah, they figured out the NIL. They have it going strong. And I mean, even just talking to sources the last 24 hours, there was hope that Cam Ward would be on campus this weekend. And,
wow.
That's not going to play out the way they were hoping, and that's okay. They have some elite wide receiver talent coming in, but I mean, yeah, I think it's just evidence of how the Cards have it rolling, man.
Yeah, and this, like, you knew when Jeff Brom got there, he was going to get him going, but I feel like he got him going faster because they were better on the field this year than we thought they were going to be, and now roster construction-wise, this looks like it could be one of the better rosters in the ACC by next year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone entering the year expected them to be in the ACC title game. I mean, I didn't.
No.
But yeah, I mean, even if they just like get Corey Brooks or Colin Lacey, I mean, that is a wide receiver one for the Cardinals. Maybe, I mean, at least someone who's definitely going to make an impact. And they also had the UCF cornerback Court Thornton in. Had 3 interceptions this year. So yeah, I think they're doing a heck of a job bringing talent.
You can say a hell of a job on this show. It sounds like they are doing a hell of a job, but. I want to switch now to one of my favorites. I was very excited to find out where this guy was going. So Curtis Rourke, the Canadian Cannon, leaving the Ohio U Bobcats. He lands with Kirk Cignetti and the Indiana Hoosiers.
Yeah, I exchanged messages with Curtis after his commitment, and I mean, he was awesome at Ohio, right? He 2022 MAC Offensive Player of the Year, had a great arm. But similar to his brother Curtis, who's now on the Jacksonville Jaguars roster, I mean, it's all about NFL development in this decision, and he thinks Indiana can really fit what he wants to do and develop, and he's going to be an NFL-esque offense at IU, and he really thinks that this is going to be able to elevate him.
Yeah, it is. It'll be fascinating. Speaking of Kirk Cignetti, he was James Madison coach. We got Jordan McLeod still in the transfer portal, his quarterback from JMU, who started at USF, went to Arizona, went to JMU. I don't think Jordan McLeod's a grad, so he can hop around as much as he wants. He doesn't need the temporary restraining order on the transfer rules, but it does sound like he's taking full advantage of the transfer rules.
I would be stunned to see him land at Indiana too. I think it'd make a lot of sense, but I guess we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I did want to ask you about, because you cover the business of college sport as well, all of the NIL and the different rules changes that are going on. That court case in West Virginia, which feels like it's impacting basketball quite a bit more now, but a temporary restraining order issued in federal court basically against the NCAA's transfer rules. So there's a 14-day window where they don't apply. There might be a permanent injunction issued in 2 weeks. We'll find out. But is that potentially going to affect anybody in football right now, or is that more of a basketball situation right now?
You know, the NCAA came out with a statement today saying that if an athlete did play and then the NCAA ended up winning a court case, that they would be penalized their 1 year of eligibility. I feel like quite a few phone calls today from a slew of people, and I had to politely tell them, like, I don't know if your player needs to go here, or I don't know if that's the best decision, because I would really just wait to see how this case plays out.
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's really 2 weeks. So what it would be with football is if you have a bowl game between now and the 27th, and you just sort of got to figure that out. One that was interesting to me, and I checked with Florida State on this one, because Darrell Jackson, he had transferred from Miami this past year, from Maryland to Miami before that, and he was denied his waiver. Well, because of when he transferred to Florida State, he actually can play in the Orange Bowl because he's been at Florida State a year now. So he has fulfilled the requirement. And so the defensive tackle, that Florida State had hoped. And just imagine if he'd played for that defense with Fisk and and Jared Verse on that defensive line.
That'd be crazy.
So, but he's playing in the Orange Bowl.
That's awesome for him. I think what has happened in this court case has left a lot of people confused. The NCAA double backed on its statement from yesterday.
That's
weird. Which was like, I mean, what if a player played last night because of it? Like, I'd have to go look in on that.
Several did. There was I believe a UNLV basketball player who played and scored like 14 points. That's awesome. And so that is it's going to be a very interesting time. And you've been covering all this stuff, for the last couple of years, but I just feel like if that permanent injunction gets issued in 2 weeks, it's basically open season on every NCAA rule if you're a plaintiff's attorney.
Yeah, I mean, and not to go all big picture. I mean, we're at a breaking point right now, Andy, right? Like we cannot it's not good for college athletes to have the NCAA rule book picked apart in open court. Right?
One by one. Yeah, exactly.
And this is not my open campaign for Congress to step in. My point is, though, it's just evidence of a broken system that definitely needs to be remodeled somehow.
Yeah, somebody needs to go get together in a room and try to build it up from scratch. I don't think getting the federal government to do it for them is the smartest idea because they tend to put in things you might not want. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward, because if this judge issues that permanent injunction in 13 days, they're going to have to understand that this is it. Like, you got to rebuild the system after that. So we'll have a lot to talk about and write about.
Yeah, a lot to talk about.
So, Pete, back to the transfer portal though. Like, what are you most looking forward to over the weekend in the next week to finding out from the transfer portal?
It's Cam Ward, man. It's like, is he gonna go to the NFL? I mean, I continue to talk to people who keep saying like the NFL is a viable option, and I don't want to jump ahead of it, but like, what if he goes on these visits and he still wants to go to the NFL? Like, you're going to leave quite a few schools like really scratch. I don't think that's going to happen, but I still think it's a real option. So just finding out what Cam Ward's going to do and have these quarterback dominoes fall. Really want to see what Lincoln Riley does at USC. Does he bring a quarterback? I mean, he's been pounding on the door at some places, and they still have Malachi Nelson. So how does that play out? And then the last thing is Arizona State. I know it's really random, but they did bring in a quarterback. Does Jaden Rashada stay put? Does he not?
I saw his dad Harlan had an Instagram post this week that had the little circle, the loading. So I don't know what that means. I've written quite a bit about that situation with Jaden Rashada, with Miami, with Florida, with Arizona State. We'll see what happens, but you're right. Kenny Dillingham has been talking to some quarterbacks in the transfer market, and we'll see what it means. But if it means Jaden Rashada is in the transfer market, boy, howdy. That could be another fun recruitment to follow.
We're just getting started if that happens.
Exactly. Pete Nakos, thank you for the multitude of Nakosifications today.
Thank you, Andy.
That is Pete Nakos taking a tour of the transfer portal. It is a vast void filled with players looking for new homes. Pete is your guide, and I think he's doing a hell of a job. We got a couple things to dig deep into today. First, Michigan State. There's a ton going on in East Lansing. Jonathan Smith has taken over. He's got a defensive coordinator in the fold now officially. He's got a quarterback in the fold now officially. A lot still moving around there in terms of guys they have in the portal, some guys coming out of the portal and staying. But it is one of those jobs where they have so much to do. There's a lot to talk about. Jason Killop from Spartan Mag will join us very shortly. Later, we talk to Joe Tipton, On3's college basketball recruiting guru. Tipton Edits. He's the guy the players go to when they say, hey, here's where I want to commit. Well, Joe stays in touch when these guys get to college too. And we're going to talk about some of the biggest games this weekend. This is a huge weekend in college basketball. You've got North Carolina, Kentucky. You've got Auburn, USC. You've got a very fun Baylor, Michigan State matchup, and maybe the most fun matchup, Arizona, Purdue in Indianapolis. Hey, would you like to go to the Arizona Purdue game in Indianapolis? Perhaps the biggest college basketball game so far this season. You can do it with Game Time. That's right. Plenty of tickets available, good seats, Bankers Life Fieldhouse. You're very close to a certain steakhouse with a certain shrimp cocktail, and potentially, again, the best college basketball game of the regular season so far. Maybe you want to go to the Sugar Bowl. Maybe you want to go to the Rose Bowl, see the college football playoff. So you want to see Texas, Washington in New Orleans? Well, go to Game Time. You download that app. You can look exactly where your ticket would be. You see the vantage point from the seat you would have, and a couple more taps, and that seat is yours. By the way, if you use the code STAPLES when you buy that ticket, you will get $20 off your first purchase. So download the Game Time app, code STAPLES, $20 off your first purchase. Also, you want to go see an NFL game for $9? That's right. The Falcons and the Panthers playing this weekend in Charlotte. Game Time has a ticket for $9 right now. Unbelievable. So download Game Time. Use that code STAPLES. $20 off your first purchase. I don't know how that works if the ticket is only $9. Buy a ticket for a friend. Then, you can use the whole discount. I think that's the best way to do it. Go to Game Time. Code STAPLES. $20 off your first purchase. The tickets are going to be much hotter at Michigan State in the fall of 2024 than they were in the fall of 2023 when they were dealing with all of the fallout from Mel Tucker's firing in September. Jonathan Smith has come from Oregon State to be the steady hand to make their program kind of what it was during the Mark D'Antonio era. That I think is the goal for Michigan State right now. That includes keeping one Mark D'Antonio era assistant on the staff. We learned this week that Harlan Barnett is staying. Jason Killop from Spartan Mag joins us to talk about all of the things going on in East Lansing because Jonathan Smith has been a busy, busy man. We are joined now by Jason Killop of Spartan Mag. That is On3's Michigan State site, and it's been a busy, busy week in East Lansing. Jonathan Smith, the new Spartans coach, came from Oregon State. Now he's got his quarterback, Aiden Childs, who he signed at Oregon State last year and coached at Oregon State last year. Jason, how did that process go? And was it always going to be Aiden Childs reuniting with Jonathan Smith?
Yeah, I think Aiden Childs was very attracted into following Jonathan Smith to East Lansing. He fits into that offensive system really well, run by offensive coordinator Brett Lindgren. And of course, it's a massive pickup for Michigan State with an empty quarterback room at the moment. Childs can step in, and Michigan State fans can expect to see him on the field right away. He played as a true freshman for Oregon State last year, splitting time with DJ Uiagalelei, the Clemson transfer. So he has experience already as just a true sophomore next season, and he knows the system, and he's very familiar with Jonathan Smith and Brian Lindgren. And he brings something to the table that Michigan State fans aren't used to with the dynamic dual threat capabilities. And he's a guy that will attract other talent to follow him to East Lansing. So it's a big first step for Jonathan Smith as he arrives in East Lansing to get that quarterback position locked up and keep pushing that momentum.
I'm now trying to remember the last dual threat quarterback Michigan State had, because I'm struggling. I'm struggling, Jason.
I've seen people bring up Drew Stanton as a guy that goes back a little bit. There's not too many really when you think about it. Michigan State's really stuck with that kind of pro style quarterback and offense. So Michigan State fans can be excited about that dual threat capabilities. Childs had 3 rushing touchdowns as a true freshman with Oregon State in his limited role. And he can extend plays and keep the chains moving. So it's a little bit different, but Michigan State should be excited to have that in Smith's offense.
I was going to say Rocky Lombardi, but it feels like the threat was mostly on the ground.
Yeah, Rocky was. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very interesting because, and it does feel like a departure, but how much of this should feel familiar for a lot of these guys? Because it does seem, I've seen reports of more visitors coming from Oregon State. I would assume there's more coaches coming after they have their bowl game, that potentially more players may come. Exactly how much is Jonathan Smith going to be importing from Corvallis?
Yeah, so they have offensive coordinator Brian Lindgren on staff, and then they have running backs coach and assistant head coach Keith Bonafa. He was recruiting coordinator and running backs coach for Oregon State. And then tight ends coach Brian Wozniak, defensive line coach, and defensive backs coach Blue Adams. So those are just the on-field assistants that Smith brought over, which is quite a few. And then the recruiting department is filled with some guys from Oregon State as well. And as Michigan State fans know, last night, they received 2 commitments out of the high school ranks from Texas running back Mekhi Frazier and California tight end Wyatt Hook. Both were previously committed to Oregon State, and they both took official visits to Michigan State over the weekend and decided to join Smith and company in East Lansing. And they won't be done adding kids from Oregon State. Michigan State fans, we're recording this on December 14th. There should be a commitment coming this evening, so stay tuned to that. And
there we go.
Yeah, so he is kind of making it Corvallis East, so Michigan State fans can be excited about that, plug in some holes that are on the roster currently.
Got to get used to the specific time commitments with the guys with the West Coast background. But one guy who's coming who is not from Corvallis, he's coming from elsewhere in the Big Ten. That's Joe Rossi, the defensive coordinator. Now, he hired away from Minnesota. He's been at Minnesota for a long time. He's been there since 2017. For those who don't remember, he was elevated to defensive coordinator at the end of the 2018 season. Basically, they had one of the worst rushing defense games you will ever see against Illinois. And PJ Fleck made a change. Rossi got promoted, and he's been their DC since. This was not a case of them trying to get rid of him. This was Michigan State going and taking him. And Jason, what does Joe Rossi bring to East Lansing?
Yeah, Joe Rossi, for the recruiting side of things, he immediately got to work on the recruiting trail. Michigan State was actually hosting a Minnesota commitment 4-star linebacker Brady Pretzlaff out of Gaylord, Michigan. He was on campus over the weekend, and he's committed to Minnesota at the moment. So he has a very close relationship with Joe Rossi. And as you mentioned, Joe Rossi is an experienced defensive coordinator and a guy that Pretzlaff sees himself fitting in his defense well. So Pretzlaff decommitted from Minnesota last night, and that's obviously something to watch for Michigan State as signing day approaches December 20th. He wants to have a decision then. So having Rossi in East Lansing helps with him, but it's not just one recruit, of course. So as he gets settled in East Lansing, we'll continue to work with guys out of the transfer portal and things to that effect.
Now, this isn't a complete, just everybody's going to be new, because they are retaining Harlan Barnett, who dates back to the Mark D'Antonio staff, retaining Courtney Hawkins, the receivers coach. What went into those decisions to keep those guys?
Yeah, so with the familiarity they have in-state recruiting and with Michigan State in the Midwest, with Courtney Hawkins and Harlan Barnett both being former players as well. So there's a lot of good things that they can do coaching and recruiting with that background. And Harlan Barnett, native of Cincinnati, a very important recruiting area for Michigan State. And also, when he took over as interim head coach this fall, he was a key role in keeping all those guys away from the portal throughout the season. And obviously, Michigan State had some guys enter the portal, but a lot of guys waited it out and stayed in East Lansing. And you can give those kids some respect for that, and Harlan Barnett some credit for keeping them around. And as far as the 2024 class goes, there's 3 defensive backs committed in the class: Jalen Thompson and Keyshawn Williams of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and Justin Denson of Providence, Rhode Island. And all 3 of those guys credit Harlan Barnett for keeping in touch with them the whole time. And they were on campus. Thompson and Williams will be on campus this weekend, and Denson was last weekend. And keeping Hawkins and Barnett helps keep the class in fold, helps keep the players on the roster, helps retain guys, and helps the Midwest recruiting connections going forward.
As you mentioned, they have lost some guys. Obviously, both quarterbacks who played last year are gone. Noah Kim committed to Coastal Carolina on Thursday. Spencer Brown, the offensive tackle, is going to Oklahoma, where he's probably a plug-and-play starter there. But I thought it was interesting that a couple of offensive linemen, Ethan Lloyd and Brandon Baldwin, withdrew from the portal, decided to come back. How much did Jonathan Smith and company work on talking to guys when they got there, saying, hey, give us a shot before you decide you want to take off.
Exactly. Some of the kids did enter the portal before they got that shot from the new staff. And I think that's a result of seeing Ethan Boyd and Brandon Baldwin, two offensive linemen, come out of the portal and return back to East Lansing. They had multiple conversations with the staff, and Ethan Boyd told our website, SpartanMag.com, that this Jonathan Smith and offensive line coach Jim McKelsick showed Ethan Boyd appreciation that it was not there before. So just coming in and talking to those guys, everybody, even whether they're in the portal or whether they're not, and building those relationships. When Jonathan Smith was introduced in East Lansing, he said that he didn't sit in the homes of these kids. He didn't recruit them. So he totally understands kids wanting to test their waters in the portal. And I think having that open outlook on things and inviting them back, you'll see a couple more withdrawals from the portal in the next coming days, but there's still kids entering as well. And it's a two-way communication between the coaches and the players, and they're doing their best to retain guys that they think will help. And there's guys on the roster like that will help. And true freshman linebacker Jordan Hall, there was a lot of interest in, was he going to enter the portal? Is he not? And he posted to social media earlier this week that he's going to stay in East Lansing. And so that's a big addition for Michigan State that's already on the roster. So Smith and company are out there looking at the portal, looking at high school, and also recruiting their roster the way they need to keep everybody in East Lansing.
How important is it for Jonathan Smith to just kind of calm everything down there? Because it seems like, even when it was good 3 years ago, when they had, or 2 seasons ago, when they had the great year, went to the Peach Bowl, and then they fall off after that. And then obviously everything melts down with Mel Tucker getting fired. How much do they need just some calmness and continuity with this program?
Yeah, that's exactly what the program needs. No doubt about it. And back to Harlan Barnett and Courtney Hawkins, I think they help keep that calmness in there. The players really do bond with those two guys, and the players that were already on the roster know them well. Smith has come in, and I think Barnett and Hawkins keep a level of calmness in there. And like you said, that's much needed in East Lansing right now. And some familiar, fresh new faces, I think is going to really turn the page for them.
And you mentioned those offensive linemen deciding to come out of the portal. How much excitement is there about the style of play that Smith brings? Because it seems like what he did at Oregon State, in terms of, they were really good on both lines of scrimmage. They love to run the ball. It feels like something that would be embraced in the Big Ten.
No doubt. And yeah, exactly. And the players in the portal are noticing that, and recruits are noticing that. And especially now that they've got their quarterback in Aiden Childs, they can keep pushing that offensive philosophy out there. And it's a little bit of a change of pace for Michigan State fans and Michigan State observers, with previous head coaches, a lot of them defensive focused, and having that offensive Pac-12 style of play come over here is welcomed, and the offensive players are excited about it. That's for sure.
As someone who covers a lot of recruiting, I'm curious about this, because it feels like Michigan State has bounced between recruiting philosophies quite a bit. You had the thing that worked for D'Antonio for years and years, where they were finding these gems, these diamonds in the rough, and developing them. And where it seemed to start falling apart for D'Antonio is when they started chasing stars a little bit. And then you get Mel Tucker in there, and he says, no, I want to recruit the same body types as Ohio State. I want to get those guys on campus. Maybe I can sign them, maybe not. And it didn't look like they ended up getting any of those guys. What's the philosophy going to be from Jonathan Smith in terms of recruiting? Because obviously he's not coming from a place where you could get 4- and 5-star talent regularly.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a mixture of those philosophies, and that's what the perfect common ground is where you build your base in Michigan, in Ohio, in Chicago, in Illinois, and Indiana, and these areas around the Midwest, the places that the kids can get in cars and drive to East Lansing from, places where their parents can get in cars and drive to games. In the era of the transfer portal, I think that really does play a big factor when players are looking at things at the end of the day. How close is campus? How easy can they get there? And sometimes you get a kid from California and it doesn't work out for them right away, and they want to go back home, and that's completely understandable. And with building around from the Midwest, you can get you can set your foundation. You can get some higher 3-star, lower 4-star level guys from your area, and then you can look outward from there and go down. And Michigan State has had success in Texas and Florida, and at times in the past, and a lot of that success comes with on-field success, of course. but you can set the foundation in the Midwest and you build out from there. You go down to Texas and Florida and you can finish your class with some higher level kids down there. And I think that's what Smith is going to look to do here as he gets things rolling. And as the program gets itself back to a higher level, then that's when recruiting can take another higher level jump as well.
So how do the people in the Michigan State fan base feel about the way that this new Big Ten schedule is going to work? Obviously, they're always going to play Michigan, but they don't have to play Penn State next year. They do have to play Oregon. Ohio State's still there, so that it doesn't feel like it gets any easier. But does it feel like it's a little more fun with things changing up a little bit, or is it just different?
Yeah, it is. I think it's more fun, and especially for me, someone who covers recruiting, I like covering recruiting nationally, and that with recruiting territories expanding and the Big Ten territory expanding, and with the schedule as they go, I think there is a factor that Michigan State fans might not have noticed at first, where, like you said, they don't play Penn State every year. They do not play Ohio State every single year. And those spots will be filled in with UCLA, Oregon, Washington, etc. But also you get a lot more games against the former Big Ten West, which was some of the schools on the lower end of the scale. So you get to play some more of those and less of the schools in the East, less demands of Ohio State every single year, Penn State every single year. But like you said, you'll fill those up in games against Oregon and Washington. Those games will be tough and those will be fun as well. And it's something you're not totally used to. So I think it'll be fun as it gets going.
But you know who is used to playing those teams? Jonathan Smith.
There you go.
He's been playing him for years now. Played him when he was in college, so he'll fit right in. And I know Oregon's on the schedule. The Spartans have to go to Eugene, so it'll be just like the Civil War for him.
Yeah, I think that's their first Big Ten conference game, if I'm not wrong. Home conference game.
No, they got Ohio State before that. So just the easy 2 week win of Ohio State and at Oregon.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, welcome to the league, Jonathan Smith. You get to play somebody familiar, but you got to play the Buckeyes first. Jason, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So much going on with the Spartans, so much work to be done for Jonathan Smith and staff. We have a lot of work to do in the college basketball season. It's almost time for conference play, but there is one last gasp of great non-conference games coming right at you this weekend. You've got Purdue and Arizona in Indianapolis. You've got Kentucky and North Carolina in Atlanta. You've got Kansas going to Assembly Hall in Bloomington to play Indiana. You got USC and Auburn. You got Baylor and Michigan State. This is going to be a packed weekend. Who better to talk to than Joe Tipton? That's right. Tipton Edits, the guy who breaks all the recruiting news. We talked to him about how he got into that line of work and also about this monster college basketball weekend coming up. You know Joe Tipton, even if your brain is telling you, I haven't seen Joe Tipton on the show before, but you have seen Joe Tipton on your Instagram feed and on your Twitter feed. Every time a college or a future college basketball player commits, that edit is coming from Joe. Like, it is almost universal. Joe, before we get into previewing this weekend, tell everybody how you got into this. Because we've talked to Hayes Fawcett about how he's done it on the football side, but how did you get into being the guy that these players trust to break their commitments?
Well, first, I was, the first guy to do it. Nobody was, at least on the basketball side, and Hayes was probably the same for football, but there wasn't really anyone doing graphics for high school kids whenever they wanted to announce their top 5 schools or their commitment to a program. I remember Donovan Mitchell, of course, is star in the NBA now. This was pre-Tipton Edits. He goes into the notes of his phone, types out his top 5 schools, screenshots it, Instagram and Twitters it. So it's changed a whole lot because now you don't see anyone doing that. They always have a graphic. So just over time, many, many years of doing it, eventually kind of led me here, and it's been an awesome journey.
So Notes app is for apologies. Notes app is not for happy news. Like that's the rules of the internet. Like you can't put here's where I'm going to school on the Notes app. So I'm glad you've filled that need and and in the process have gotten to know a lot of the best basketball players in the country. And you know, a lot of these guys we've already seen move through college into the NBA.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Zion Williamson, Cade Cunningham, Paolo Banchero, you know, the list kind of goes on and on. So it's really a unique position, especially kind of catch them early on, you know, when they're 16, 17, 18 years old, before the basketball world and the world knows them at all. So it's very unique.
So the Zion one I'm curious about, because he was very famous as a high school kid because of the dunking on Instagram. How does that first contact get made?
So with Zion, I can't even remember how it began, but I'm sure it was just he DM'd me or I DM'd him, and you know, I'd already been kind of operating my Tipton Edits page for a couple of years, in kind of when he blew up. So we would just kind of message back and forth throughout the recruitment process. And it's funny, before he got super famous, I kind of knew that he was going to be big, just because of there's this dude that's 6'6", 270 pounds and jumps the way he does, and he's a highlight machine. So I screenshotted his Instagram following, and he's at like 50,000 followers. And then like a year later, he's at like, this is while he's still in high school before he goes to Duke and even blows up further. You know, he's at like 250,000 followers. And I like even sent it to him, and he was like, wow, you know, it's crazy that you kind of saw that coming. So I think anybody would have seen that coming, though, just because based on, you just don't see basketball players, you know, that look like football players jump the way he does. So.
Right. The explosion was the thing. We were just like, whoa. But so you see these guys, you know, on the recruiting circuit. Now they're in college. We're going to talk a little about, you know, some of the better freshmen in America. Well, we'll start with it. There's a game this weekend, you know, Kentucky, North Carolina. And Coach Cal has a pretty heralded freshman class, but the guy everybody's in love with right now is Reed Sheppard out of that class, who probably wasn't the, you know, everybody's thinking DJ Wagner, Rob Dillingham, that those guys are going to be the breakout stars. But what did you see from Reed Sheppard when he was in high school on the AAU circuit that you know, sort of gave you an idea that this might happen?
Well, to be perfectly honest, if you said that you saw this happening, him being
you didn't see it coming
in his freshman year at Kentucky, then you're lying. No one saw this coming. Coach Cal in interviews was not even mentioning Reed among his stud freshmen. I mean, if Coach Cal doesn't see it coming, then none of us see it coming. But just his overall feel for the game. I mean, you could tell, you know, that guy was, you know, made to play basketball. He really understands it. His defense, his shot making. I even interviewed him. It was at an event last year. I kind of said, you know, what do you expect your role to be as a freshman? And he said, kind of whatever Coach Cal wants me to do. If he wants me to get him water, I'll get him water. If he wants me to come in and knock down a shot, I'll come in and knock a shot. So it's been incredible to see kind of his rise, and of course his parents going there and having so much success. It's a very unique story.
Yeah, his dad's an unforgettable. So but it's interesting because that's not something you expect to hear from a guy going to Kentucky on scholarship. Like, I'll get him. Like, that's just not typically. But it's funny because I remember when they last won the national title, that was a group. Now, they were very highly recruited, Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, those guys. But they were all super selfless. Like, didn't worry about it. And they had kind of a couple of veterans that helped them along. And, you know, so maybe that's the Antonio Reeves role on this team. But it's interesting to me because they're going to play, you know, a more veteran heavy North Carolina team, and you see the younger guys and the grown men.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think Coach Cal is, at least with this year, he's mastered it with a little bit of the, you know, the veteran leadership that you need in college basketball to win, the older player along with the freshman McDonald's All-American caliber player. We saw, you know, the past couple years, he tried to bring in a bunch of transfers, kind of got away from that young style of play. Didn't necessarily work out for him. And there was, you know, Kentucky fans were not happy with how things were going. But this year, there is definitely a newfound excitement in Kentucky basketball. They're playing faster. They're shooting more threes. They're playing a modern style of basketball. Kentucky is fun to watch.
So UNC, Kentucky, probably the two biggest brands playing this weekend, but that's probably not the game that everybody's excited about. That game happening in Indianapolis. I believe Ken Palm would call it a quasi-home game for Purdue, Arizona, Purdue. And we talk about Caleb Love with Arizona, but I feel like this is a situation where they're two 7-footers, Ballo and Krivas, they kind of take center stage as they've got to figure out what to do with Zach Edey probably before they foul out.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the unique thing about Purdue and Zach Edey is that, how do you stop him? I understand there's other 7-footers in college basketball, but when you have a guy that's 7'4", 300 pounds, moves the way he does, is able to score and get to the free throw line, everybody always wants to say, oh, he's shooting 25 free throws a game. Well, it's because you have to foul him in order to stop him. He's just that strong. He's that physical. He's that, big of a post presence. So he's a difficult one to stop. And, he gets your front court players in trouble. And, it is hard to stop that big man.
And it feels like he's opened up so much more space for Braden Smith, who had a good freshman year, but now he looks like he could be one of the best players in the Big Ten.
Yeah, he's made a huge jump. A lot of the criticism about Purdue last year was that, can Braden, can Fletcher Loyer, can they handle that pressure in the backcourt? And that was kind of, what did them in some losses last year was, but now they're, a year older, they're a year wiser. Most college basketball players make their biggest jump from their freshman to sophomore year. So they're new and improved. And then they landed they brought in another transfer from, I think it was Southern Illinois, Lance Jones. So he's another veteran piece that gives them that kind of, that veteran piece as well.
So what do you think happens in that game?
That's a great question. You got two top 5 offenses in the country per Ken Palm, and then 2 top 10 defenses. Arizona's going to try to speed them up. Arizona plays much faster than Purdue. Purdue plays a little bit, slower style of play. It's going to be a very interesting one to watch. One guy that really stands out to me for Arizona is, you mentioned Caleb Love. He's been great so far. He's shooting the ball more efficiently. He's sharing the ball. He was kind of that go-to guy last year at Carolina, the guy that could at times be a little shot heavy, but he's averaging 4.5 assists this season. But I think the key for Arizona is Keshad Johnson. He brings a defensive component that Arizona did not have last year. Transfer from San Diego State, played in the Final Four last year. I think he's the key.
How much does having that experience help? He's played in bigger games than this. This is not going to intimidate him whatsoever.
Oh, absolutely. That's every year you see it, transfer portal, it's the talk of the town every year. I know football is going through it now. It'll be a few more months for basketball, but teams want to get older. Colleges are taking less high school kids and they want to, get those grad transfer guys. This is the last year of the COVID year before it phases out. But so the experience matters, but then also coming from a winning program like Keshad Johnson at San Diego State matters as well.
So let's talk about the guys who, you were helping break their commitments last year. They're freshmen this year. Who have been the ones that have stood out to you as kind of the quickest studies once they got into college basketball?
Yeah, a few that come to mind. Jacoby Walter at Baylor is one. Baylor is really good this year. I think most people, at least if you watched Jacoby play in the high school ranks, you kind of saw this coming. He was the perfect replacement for Keontae George, who also found success at Baylor. Very similar shot maker, guy that gets to his spots and can really score at a former McDonald's All-American as well. He's been a huge standout for me. Another guy, Isaiah Collier at USC. He's a lot of the question marks that he had coming out of high school were, can he shoot? Okay, we know he's a strong, tough guard, downhill guard, really, really talented passer, but can he shoot the basketball? That was the question. Well, he at least from the field, he's almost 50% from the field. He is a little bit turnover prone. I think he's averaging like 4 turnovers a game, which is not ideal. And but I think a lot of that will just come with him being more comfortable, as the season goes on. But those are kind of 2 guys that initially stand out.
Yeah, and USC breaking Bronny James back in. We saw him against Long Beach State making his debut. That game this week is still going to be everybody talking about Bronny James because of who he is. But USC's playing Auburn on Saturday. So you get Collier versus Aiden Holloway, which is one of the better freshman point guard matchups you're going to see this season.
Absolutely. They're very different players. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out because Aiden is a little bit smaller, but he's a much better shooter. He can shoot the cover off the ball. He is not afraid to let it fly either. He fits perfectly in Coach Pearl's system there at Auburn. And then Collier, a little bit more of a pass first guy, but can also really score it, but loves to get downhill. Aiden would rather shoot around the perimeter. He can get to the rim, shoot floaters, but that's also going to be an interesting matchup as well.
So, Joe, as we get these next couple of weeks will lead us into conference play. What teams do you feel like have kind of evolved over this early period, and you're excited to see them when they get into their conference and really get into the meat of their schedule?
Yeah, I think Kansas is one that initially stands out to me. Them adding Hunter Dickinson, I think, was a huge piece. Right now, obviously, Hunter, 7'2", top transfer from the portal last season, coming in from Michigan, double machine. We've seen how Bill Self likes to play through his bigs. He's doing just that, but he can also step out. He's shooting 58% from 3 at 7'2", 265 pounds.
Kansas going to Assembly Hall on Saturday. By the way, there's a bunch of fun games. You got Kansas, Indiana, Baylor, Michigan State. We mentioned North Carolina, Kentucky, Arizona, Purdue. Like, this is going to be a fun weekend, Joe.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really excited for the Kentucky North Carolina one. That's probably my must. Actually, I take that back, Andy. I think Purdue and Arizona is my must-see game of the weekend, but it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it is. And those are both. Now, Kentucky, North Carolina is a true neutral site. It's in Atlanta. I would imagine that's kind of a 50-50 crowd, but in Indy, Purdue, Arizona is probably going to be about 90-10. So that'll be a Purdue home game just in walking distance of St. Elmo's Steakhouse, which, listen, a shrimp cocktail will get you going. So
there you go.
Joe, thank you so much.
Absolutely, Andy.
Thank you to Joe Tipton. Very excited for these games this weekend. There's so much to watch. So much to watch because we've got all those great college basketball games on Saturday. There's some NFL games on Saturday, and there are 5 bowl games on Saturday. So, listen, don't get sucked into the NFL when you could be watching Diego Pavia in the New Mexico Bowl. You know you want to. It's going to be so much fun. It's bowl season, baby. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Talk to you Sunday.